Okay, this is July 24th, 2011, and I'm doing an interview with Gil Cardenas. Gil, I guess we could always call you the padrino of the Consejo. So we want to start out something about the early history. How did you, this came out of IUPLR, right?
Yes.
Will you tell us about the beginning?
Well, I can tell you that for many years I've been interested in printmaking and collecting prints from artists since the 1960s, and over the years have developed, I think, a pretty good and strong connection to the artists in the printmaking world among other artists, and it's always been a favorite area, genre for me, the way they work and what they do. And over the years have kind of lamented that a lot of these print centers and studios, these artists and directors of these studios didn't know each other or hadn't worked with each other. Some knew each other, but it was a big disconnect, I guess. Years back, we had an opportunity to apply for a grant, which we were successful in getting with the Department of Health and Human Services to do an education and awareness on AIDS, and that basically, among other things, at least the main part of it was creating posters addressing the problems with AIDS and trying to communicate visually to different segments of our community in English and Spanish, through graphic design and imagery, the problem of AIDS and a call line, etc. And this is an IUPLR sponsored project.
And what year are we talking about?
Oh my gosh, probably 2000, thereabouts. And we also called to establish an advisory committee to give us advice and counsel. It's a 5-year grant, and I decided to focus primarily on the directors of print studios so they could help us think about the graphics and also make connections to the artists and also to help us get work produced in this area. And we brought them here to Notre Dame and had some meetings. It turned out very productive, and they got to meet each other, for those that didn't know each other, and got to exchange ideas about the work they're doing and the needs that they had as printmakers. And also, they also were able to, on their own, really discuss the importance of having a national effort that they chose to spearhead that advanced Latino printmaking in the United States. And so that was the beginnings of what emerged as the Consejo Gráfico. It was their idea. They put it together. We just merely facilitated their coming together as an advisory council for our project.
Do you remember some of the people, they that sort of put it together?
Well, Tomás Benitez, we had just Joe Segura, we had from Mission Gráfica, Juan Fuentes participated. We've had pretty much the people who are still involved for the most part now, but Rene Arceo, we from back east, later Pepe Coronado participated. We had our follow-up meeting in Santa Fe, hosted by some friends, and our dear friend Michael O'Shaughnessy, who passed away a couple years back now. They facilitated a meeting there at their home in Santa Fe, and that's where Jesus Varaza joined. We had another fellow from Miami, the art historian son, ¿cómo se llama? Martinez. His son, yeah, he did more digital. Younger fellow, was involved with the early formation. Sam Coronado, a series project in Austin. We also had, Artemio Rodriguez with La Mano Press. So that was, I hope I got everybody, but that was the beginning part of it.
Early on, tell me a little bit about Taller Boricua, because that was...
I'm sorry, the Taller Boricua, my big absence here, sorry. Yeah, it's interesting, I've known Fernando Salecru for many, many years. Met him in New York, and he had a apartment loft studio. And he was telling me one time that he was going to get this building and create the center and have all these different things for art, and I'm listening to it. I said, well, it sounds like a good idea, but in my mind I was thinking,
pie in the sky.
Yeah, it's pie in the sky. I didn't believe him. Well, sure enough, he and Marcos and others, the theyve Boricua, secured a building, which is now the Julia de Burgos Center, and did everything they said they're going to do and more. And I was really, really pleased. So we had formed a politics and art working group for IUPLR years back when I was at the University of Texas at Austin. Marquez Montoya, who also participated, I'm sorry, from the beginning of the Consejo, and Leslie. They had, we had this art and politics working group, and we had some meetings in Austin and Chicago, and that's where I met Fernando. And we stayed connected. I got to meet Marcos and other people associated with the theyve Boricua later, some former members who had participated. And our first, or during our first year, one of our first exhibitions at the Institute was Fernando Saleh Group's one-person show. And I don't know if the camera's capturing it, but maybe down the road we might get a picture of this image here. But it's here. It's been here in this office for many, many years. And he produced a catalog. He came with a catalog that he produced and left us a box of catalogs, and it's a wonderful show. And Fernando, I think, is a pioneer in digital artwork. He was doing this when it wasn't popular, and really influenced a lot of people in El Barrio and other places that he associated with, and had a big printer and printed with the artists, did portfolios and various things of that sort. I generally don't like digital art, and I'll tell you why. Is because often this is just copying imagery that people have done before and then selling it with a signature on it and framing it, and a lot of these galleries do that, and it's just reproductions. But Fernando, he'll create work and work with artists to create work that you're not going to find anywhere. If they do a collage of things or mix imagery, it changes, and they can produce work that you can't do by hand. You know, so it's a unique and distinct piece of work, and that I respect and admire. And I think he's a real pioneer in that.
Can you remember sort of like just experiences or things that happened in the different, like the meeting in Santa Fe, the meeting in Texas at Austin, now the meeting here? We're talking about sort of like the trajectory of the. Do different things stand out in that development?
Well, initially, as I mentioned, with the Department of Health and Human Services, we finished our meeting and concluded our business for that purpose, and then informally, there was a continuation of the discussion, and when they wanted to continue meeting as an organization, and they eventually later on in Santa Fe came up with the name Consejo Gráfico, and they had to discuss its mission and their vision. They had a common vision and common mission, but some were commercial print studios, others were not-for-profit, others were more like collectives, or others were just individuals. And they had to really hone in on what the message would be to the nation as an organization. Would it be only political and social advocacy, or can it embrace in a broader arena in terms of getting people to appreciate and understand printmaking, no matter what kind of printmaking it might be, or whatever the message might be? And so they worked out a vision and statement that way. So initially, it was a decision to continue working together. Secondarily, the second phase was coming up with a common vision and a name. And then the third phase, it was to create a network, a viable network, an organizational structure. And that's taking a bit longer, and in part they were kind of dependent on us to help them in facilitating things. Brooks was my assistant and helped a lot, and then Lauren later on helped a lot when Brooks left, and but it still didn't have the continuity that it required. And they, on their own, decided that that wasn't the way to form organizationally, and began to take more initiative on their own, and began to elected Melanie as their first national chair, and got an organizational structure, and had just really taken on their shoulders and been carrying it forward, and which I think they're going to form a nonprofit or 501c3, and so they really have taken ownership of this now. So those are the kind of the distinct phases. They have developed a relationship with each other that's just incredible. I mean, and now they're meeting this week, and they've had a retreat. They're here for the entire week. Normally the meeting might just be a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. creating a print, addition of prints, and that's really a real new development. It's really exciting to see them work. They have an improvised studio space that Ramiro has provided for them, and Joe Seguro assisted. It's just exciting to watch them be productive and helping each other, learning from each other, training younger generation. We have 2 young fellows here, one at IUSB who works for us at the Institute, Maclavio, and also Freddie, who's at the Holy Cross campus across the street from Notre Dame. They're both from South Bend, and Freddie's been working for us many, many years too. And both are majoring in art, and just it's been an enormous experience for them. So this, and the Consejo people who are here really appreciate that and have been mentoring them, and it's just been great interaction. So
the next phase, we were talking about phases, probably the sustainability.
That's right.
Right after they get to the 501c3, to find ways to sustain their efforts. And what I've heard is a lot of discussion about different sorts of meetings, and that now they could sort of like put together and try to write grants and things like that to begin sustaining the.
Exactly, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that they would produce a good proposal and submit it to Ford Foundation or any other of the big foundations that help them launch, and maybe a multi-year, 5-year grant somewhere to give them the infrastructure and support they need. I'm hopeful that maybe some private benefactors might take an interest and support them, and maybe some collectors might sign up to buy their print editions as they produce. They have produced portfolios over the years. They have had exhibitions in various spaces that they have, the Talla Boricua, the Mission Gráfica, the Siri Project, Mexicarte. When Mexicarte hosted an exhibition, they did it a few years back in conjunction with an annual meeting of the Consejo in Austin, Texas, at UT Austin. And Ken Hale, who's the Associate Dean of the College of Arts at the University of Texas at Austin, who at one time headed the print department at UT Austin, told me, he said, Gil, look around you. He said, this is probably the single largest exhibition ever of Latino prints nationally in one space. And, because they exhibited the portfolios, and they also exhibited work from each of their talleres. And it was just everywhere. Beautiful exhibition. And, I mean, he's the one who noted that and just said, this is historical. And something, again, that they created and did. And I lost track of your question.
Well, no, it was just about the next phase. And,
that's right.
And one of the things that we were talking about as I interviewed them is the same question in terms of art in general, that there was a lot of production, but very little analysis, very little, writing about the groups. Yes. I remember in Austin, Tatiana, did a presentation, and probably others, because they had actually scholars to talk about their work. Right. Because, we were talking about how in the Chicano movement, even though the graphic part was very, very important, there's been that book on just another Chicano poster and exhibitions, but still they haven't been integrated into the history of Chicano art, the people that are working, maybe Malaquias Montoya,
Well, there've been some interesting articles. But you're right. Even with the exhibition catalogs, it doesn't really do justice, because that's not the intention. Those exhibition catalogs are very important, and I'm glad they've been produced, and they have tremendous value, but they focus pretty much on the exhibition, and they might recast it in terms of the history and things of that sort. But you're absolutely right, Tomás, that there's a great need for books that address perhaps each print studio that's been around for many decades, several decades in some cases, and some are more recent, and they deserve attention on their own merits and where they, what they did and what they've been doing, and the organizational aspect, the role of the director, the vision of the director, the artists that they've worked with, the kinds of connections they made, the history, the training, the training and mentorship by other Latino printmakers, but also by the broader world of art, and the influences on the art world, and their mentors, those that are formally trained in universities and art academies, and those that are not.
Yeah, it seems that one of the things that that we tried to do working in Chicano art was to begin thinking, well, we're not going to, the canon of Chicano art, which is now beginning to develop, that at one time we wanted to say it's not going to be the canon based on the hierarchy, painting, sculpture, photography, you know, in a hierarchical way. We're going to look and see what's there and you know, and create a canon out of what's there rather than impose a thing.
Right.
And in that, and yet, it seems to me that we've imposed in Chicano art the same. There's the artists, the visual artists, the painters are the first group. You know, that more analysis, more writing, whatever, and then the print, then maybe photography, but even photography, you know, photography and print are the ones that are yet not part of the canon. But I'm talking about how when people say we're going to create un nuevo arte del pueblo, it was not supposed to be, you know, reproducing, right. Yeah. And so in this sense, I think that, for example, if you look at any collection, a lot of visual graphic material is in the pamphlets or in the magazines that MIDA and other groups published when they were students and so on. And nobody has looked at all that production in terms of the graphics. And, you know, people look at ASCO, for example, and yet, you know, you look at Michigan or whatever, and ASCO published in little student papers at the university, and theyve and, you know, all of them. So I'm just saying that maybe the canon, that we have to make sure that we open up the canon and deal with, like, the graphic work in the newspapers, the graphic work in the, you know.
Right, not just work that's produced for exhibitions or for collectors or, you know, sales in galleries.
Right.
So I'm absolutely with you, and, you know, I've had, as you have had too, Tomás, and others, we've really, I think, taken a very serious interest in preserving and collecting and preserving this material. I'm pleased to say that I have provided a good number of my collection, a good part of it, to the Julian Samora Library here at the University of Notre Dame, and administered by Tracy Graham Gort, our archivist and librarian. And you're absolutely right that that's where the material's at. And we have the collections of the prints themselves too, to the extent that they've been saved, but it's the graphic material in these small publications, rare books, and rare places that...
well, it seems like, you know, like when you look at a field, like even in Mexico, all the magazines, you know, like our newspapers, the 19th century newspapers, let's say all the newspapers that Nick has collected in, you know, nobody, I haven't, and I've always wanted to, but I haven't just done it, to look at, you know, the cartoons and the you know, the artwork, the graphic work that was in those newspapers. And, you know, we don't know whether, it would be very interesting because it may be that they were Mexican or European, but even that would be important because it would say from the very beginning it was an international movement, not just Chicano artists doing the work for the newspapers. But, so there's a lot to be done.
Or even addressing international issues.
Exactly.
I remember some of the Malaqui's early work on the Vietnam War, protest work, and other things, you know, and you know, there's almost a humanistic approach as much as a Chicano identity approach. And somebody said, you don't see the Chicano part, you see the humanistic. And it's broader, more universal, and speaking to, you know, international issues.
So I guess I'm saying that the more I think about it, is sort of like if you get the issues of Tintan magazine, it was actually an art, you know, piece. Rupert and others, the cover, and it was just a big piece of art that people could put on their wall. The newspaper itself, the fold out, and so analysis of that, or, you know, because of the hierarchy, these seem to be less art forms than the painting and the and so it's an area I don't know what
they're underappreciated, undervalued, and even unknown because a lot of researchers have to dig them out again.
And because if it was a people's art, this was what people could afford, because, you know, El Grito cost $1, the first volumes, and all the portfolios of, nobody has looked at the portfolios of El Grito, Carmen Lomas Gares, everybody was there in the portfolio, in the early days, you know, but I guess because it was in a magazine, it was not like considered high art, or, and yet we started out saying, no, we're going to look at what we're producing anyway, it's just by saying that the graphic art, and it's interesting because they call it Consejo Gráfico, not, Consejo de, Carteles or
Right.
Consejo de, it's a much broader area.
Yes.
And anyway, it was just, so this has been now, if it was 2000, we're 2011, it's about 10 years, more or less, that the Consejo has been operating.
Yes.
And what do you hope now that you're, in a way, stepping aside? I mean, you always be involved in one way or another.
Yeah, well, I announced my resignation from the Institute as director beginning July 1st. They'll have a new director.
This year?
Of 2012.
Oh, 2000,
yeah.
okay.
And I asked the provost
I was going to say,
last
you
year.
didn't invite me to the party yet.
No. He agreed that this will happen, and they're going to start a search real soon. But he told me that I would continue working in the provost's office, assistant provost, and that I would be able to continue working in the arts area, which he says is important and recognizes that. And, I'm sure I'll be teaching and doing other things of that sort. My hope in the long run for the Consejo is that they will have still a connection to Notre Dame in whatever way they want. It's, their decision. We have been building an initiative that my Associate Director, Alan Brown-Gord, and Doug Franson, our Director of Business Affairs here, and I have really been pushing to acquire a building here in South Bend. It's called the Hansel Center. The South Bend Heritage Foundation agreed to give the building to Notre Dame. We've raised about $2.5 million so far to renovate the building. We soon, hopefully, we'll have a MOU signed with all the parties involved, including the city, private donors, and others who are supporting this initiative in Notre Dame. And once built, we'll move in Segura Publishing from Arizona to this place. It'll be our featured program, and we'll have a print studio here in South Bend. I'm saying all this because from the very beginning, we have made a claim that we would also like to have Consejo Gráfico, at least physically, have a parked here on a permanent basis.
Right.
Should they just choose to. They don't have to, but they can. They will always have a space here, and by intention and by design. So, but again, that's up to the Consejo Gráfico how they want to proceed. They can have they don't have to necessarily be headquartered here. They could be headquartered anywhere, but also know that they would be welcome to continue operating or doing things here. My hope is that, we would have in addition to the studio, we'll have a gallery space, a studio space for artists. There's a carriage house that we plan to convert to 2 apartments, and we'll have visiting visual artists and visiting writers as well, creative writers. But my hope is that we would also have a visiting print studio program, so that the master printer from these print studios, rotating over a period of time, will come to do one of the prints. Let's say a self-help graphics print with the chop that they do. So they do everything they would do back home, but they would work here, and maybe work with an artist that we work with, or some kind of joint effort.
Yeah, is there a print department in the art?
There is.
The art
and
department?
Jean Dibble heads it, and really she's been very supportive and very helpful. Really marvelous printmaker and wonderful colleague. She and Joe Segura have been meeting, and she's given us advice about the direction and what we need equipment-wise, etc. So she and Joe have really provided a lot of guidance to getting this established. And she's just a wonderful colleague.
Well, one of the things, among many of the significant things you've done in all the work that you've done, and I really admire this, is that the work of the center is very related, very artistic. Whenever you get a report, it itself is an example of how art elevates, and helps, so, I think that one of the things people have noticed is how the work in your collection is really a public collection, in the sense that you use everything everything that you do. When I looked at even the notes from the Consejo, I said, my God, this is a little art piece. It's an art piece with visuals and whatever, and so I congratulate you on that, because there are very, very few people in a university, in whatever field they are, who use the arts, you know, in their everyday. It's sort of like going back to what we really wanted art to be.
That's right.
Part of ordinary, my own job, my reports that I do for the center, you know, whatever I do, I'm going to include some art piece because it's part of our culture, and this is really deep and significant, and I certainly admire what you've done in that area.
Now, you know, I have a strong interest in the arts, and I've, you know, throughout the university and here at the Institute and other institutes, we have a lot of artwork on loan, and donate a lot of artwork to the Snipe Museum. The majority of the collection will probably go to the Snipe Museum. My colleagues here at the university and the Institute in particular, you know, do really good work. So most of the reports that have come out of here are really their work and their production and their activity. And to the extent that where it's possible, I think they've selected to choose to integrate the art. So sometimes, you know, I'll suggest it, but most of the time they'll want to find some photographs. They have retained photographers to come here to photograph and document the Midwest, here in South Bend, Chicago, Detroit, various locations. Really star photographers. Antonio Turocco is a visiting art photographer here for a year, and he took an initiative to do some documentary work in South Bend and Detroit, and some work in Chicago. Alan Pogue, an Austin-based photographer, so great documentary photographer, has been retained to come over the years to photograph in Chicago for our projects there. And so that's, and we also have changing exhibition in two spaces, the Crossroads Gallery downtown, and also here at the Institute, where we converted and made a permanent gallery. Our first show was Jean Charlot, The Stations of the Cross. It was very appropriate for Notre Dame. He was a devout Catholic. At one time he was here at Notre Dame as a visiting artist. And so it was appropriate that he, coming from Mexico also, and spending many important years there, and then being raised in the U.S., or we eventually passed in Hawaii, it was added importance because he truly believed in art for the people, popular art, wrote about it, did it, influenced artists in that direction, and we're carrying that tradition here. So I'm particularly thrilled that, and I think it's very significant that we had him as our first exhibition here in our, what we call Galeria America at Notre Dame exhibit space. So the appreciation for the arts, I think, goes beyond me, but to the staff. One part I have to be real careful about is to have people not just think about the arts, and it's not to put down the arts at all, or to put it secondary, but the way I look at it as an integral part, as you explained, in the work that we do in multiple facets. But also to have people recognize the importance of the research that's coming out of here, the demographic studies, the research on health, on housing, and we've been very productive in that area, the scholarly publications that our faculty associates have accomplished. We're real proud of you don't see this often, and the number of undergraduate students and graduate students that have worked here over the years since we've been established, hundreds of students. And this has been, I think, among what we're hearing from people over the years, has been one of the things they talk about the experience at Notre Dame.
The mentoring. The
mentoring, the opportunity to work here, just the linking with the events that are happening here, participating in research, just helping us in the office,
right.
Internships.
Well, you're being very modest about it. I want to focus a little bit more on your own work, because even you, as a photographer, all of a sudden there's exhibitions of photography of Gil Cardenas, documentary photography, that is now becoming more and more important, capturing particular moments in the development of the Chicano movement. Could you talk a little bit about your own work?
Well, that's really where I got interested in the visual world, I guess. And you know, my work was in the '60s. I had a camera and I was interested in photography at the early days of the Chicano movement. I was involved, very fortunate to be involved with the formation of the first Chicano Studies student organization in California, which is MASA, Mexican American Student Association. Al Juarez and others and myself put it together around 1966, 65, I can't remember the year, at East LA Community College. And then other organizations started. We started UMAS at Cal State LA in 1967. When I transferred there, and other people, that wasn't the first UMAS. A number of UMAS had started. Cal State LA had the largest and strongest during that period of time. We had about 290 strong. Yeah. We were involved with high school walkouts and various other activities, trying to change the university in terms of its hiring of faculty, and increasing the admission of students, etc. So at that time, there was the great boycott was alive and well throughout the country, and especially in California and in Los Angeles. And so with a camera, I tried to document these activities. I had access to activities that a lot of photographers may not have had access to, but for the most part, they weren't interested. We just couldn't get them out anyway, and if there was anything, it was the police surveillance, and we found out later there's a lot of documentary work done by the police department that it still has to be uncovered, I think, and made public. But so my work was not so much the aesthetic of it, at least that wasn't my intention. It wasn't for art's sake, it was more documentary.
Yes, but if you look at it, from my perspective, when I see the work, there was a concern for the aesthetic because it's a sort of like an eye that picks certain. I mean, everybody made choices, and you made interesting choices, and it was the light, the texture, everything is there. In other words, it was very much in the tradition of documentary photography.
Right, but I didn't have the consciousness of it at that point in terms of the aesthetic part of it. I think there's aesthetic value, and you're absolutely right, in terms of just the selection and the editing and things of that sort, the composition. But I don't think I was aware of it that way. I didn't see myself as an artist, I should say. And even to this day, perhaps don't qualify myself that way, but certainly there is aesthetic value.
So can you talk just a little about where they've been shown, just over the record?
Well, over the years, we published them in some of the Chicano newspapers. We go to the Free Press, for example, and Felix Gutierrez and I would do the darkroom work, and he would write some articles, and other people would do the same thing. And often we didn't get credit, but it was there, and a very important time. I loaned work, negatives out that I never got back, unfortunately. I just saw a colleague from New Mexico who knows a fellow who mentored me, Antonio Medina, a Presbyterian minister who I gave some work to, and they had a meeting in Arizona or New Mexico, I'm not sure where, and they wanted to reproduce them, and whoever got access to the negatives didn't ever return them, so I lost a lot of negatives during that time, and so I assumed that they published them somewhere. El Grito del Norte, I remember some photographs of East Chicago and some walkouts there, and other places. At Notre Dame, we actually had an exhibit that Jose Gonzalez had put together, who was a graduate student at that time from Chicago, real activist, very important artist, Chicago area. Still is, he's not active anymore, but certainly his legacy is still here. But he put together an exhibition, and I was able to exhibit some work there as well. We had some community displays of this artwork, demonstrations and protesting, supporting the farm workers in terms of the boycott, and then later on the lettuce boycott. We did a lot of documentary work here in the Midwest, in Michigan, in Keeler, Michigan, and other places for farm worker housing, whether it be Latino or Mexican origin or African American or poor white. We did studies throughout Indiana, and a lot of this work came out in some commission reports, the Civil Rights, Indiana Commission of Civil Rights, and other places, and shared in publications as well. Texas, occasionally I would be asked to loan my photographs for exhibitions, and so there's some exhibits at UT and in the community. I created an art gallery, I created a Chapter 1 corporation, and secured a space and renovated the space in East Austin, and that's where we started Galerías y Fronteras. And I purposely never wanted to exhibit my own work in that space, and haven't to this day. The Chapter S corporation exists. The gallery really doesn't function anymore. But more recently, we've had some interest from Washington, D.C. in the collection, and Steve Velasquez and others have been down here and to see the collection, and I don't know why, but they chose to want to have an exhibit of my photographs. It wasn't my idea, and they put together an exhibit, and had it at the Organization of American States, a really wonderful exhibit. I was real pleased that it was there. And there's now an exhibit also at the Woodrow Wilson Center. That was another group of photographs that have been exhibited.
Well, we'll stop here because we'll see what other. I'm looking forward to an exhibition of your work in a major museum.
Well, thank you. I would too. Great.
One of the things that's so major when we were talking is the preservation and the archiving of all of this material. Your own work, for example, I know that you, through your work and through the center, there's an archive here, you know. But what about your archives? Talk a little bit about it.
I'd be happy to. You know, unfortunately, even though I knew better, I did not take care of my negatives or photographs very well. I still have my own darkroom in Austin and learned photography, you know, just how to print. And so I used to print my own photographs, my Bessler enlarger. But I don't know what I was thinking, but I put gathered a lot of my negatives together and put in my closet in my bedroom so I wouldn't lose them. But in a very stupid way, I had them next to my heater for years, just sitting there. And just through natural deterioration, and then I'm sure with the heat in winter times, you know, it caused it to accelerate even more deterioration. It just really kills me. I did that. But fortunately, there's been interest here on campus. My assistant, Teresa Santos, and Tracy Grimm, our librarian, and others have said, you know, this really should be preserved. And they've been working with a campus organization, with libraries and Notre Dame libraries, and there's been great advice and counsel from them. Together, a proposal was submitted to preserve the negatives and to make this available to Notre Dame libraries, which I'm very happy to do. So all the negatives and a lot of the prints are here now, and they're being digitized and organized and more documentation. So it's just a start. A lot of work has to be done on that, and I'm real grateful that there's an interest here to do that.
Well, it's a test case because almost every single person that I know of are still carrying around their boxes of stuff.
That's right.
And we don't preserve those boxes of stuff, it's all going to get disappeared. You know, I'm beginning to think that culture is like a non-renewable resource. You know, instead of people think, well, you know, there's more and more and we can find it. But once those boxes are gone and the archives...
For sure. I'll give you an example, Tomás. I found some negatives that were really old from my period here at Notre Dame. You know, not all of the negatives from Notre Dame, but some. Julian Zamora and his wife, Ernesto Galarza, a lot of the students, the graduate students, a few undergraduate students, and just different events. And I had some event at the house, and so these were in my kitchen, so I stuck them up in the cupboard just to hide them, and forgot they were there. And years later, or sometime later, I had a window that was left open on the third floor, pipe burst, and went down all the floors and got into the negatives. And when I realized that they got wet too, I pulled the negative out. I just saw the images disappear. I was just in front of my face, just. Whoom. And so that's, you know, just an example. I know we've had a big interest here. We got a grant from the Getty Foundation, Tracy Grimm and Olga Herrera, to look at the history of Latino art in the Midwest and to document this and to create an exhibition history. But also, in conjunction with that, an effort was made to provide workshops to artists to help them better appreciate and learn how they can preserve their materials and encourage them to work with institutions, libraries and other places, museums, to hold this material and give them archival materials, etc. I wish I would have had that experience early on, so I could have maintained these.
Well, I think that the model, that this is a national model, that even, you know, places with a lot of production, California or Texas, we don't have anything like this in Texas. I mean, there's great collections, you know, but usually we don't have the library helping the artists learn how to do it themselves. You know, they just are interested in the collecting part. And I think this other is very much in tune with what this was all about, preservation of our culture and institutionalizing that so that they could then get some more material, whatever.
Right, and I want to credit two people like Chon Noriega at UCLA, the theyve project, where they're doing monographs on artists and really focusing on the artists and their work rather than just a pan group of artists. And I think that's also motivated people to value the importance of maintaining their collections and things of that sort, and the papers. I remember visiting Juan Sanchez in his studio in Brooklyn and looking at boxes that had like my negatives had gotten very wet with leakage in the roof, and he had them there, and I told him about our project and talking about Chon, because I encouraged Chon to hopefully have someone do a monograph on Juan Sanchez. But I just remember seeing these boxes of material. And Yasmin Ramirez has been another, I think, pioneer with the Centro Estudios Puertorriqueños in trying to get this material in with the theyve Burico and others. Mari Carmen Ramirez's project on the, forgot the formal documentation project. Yeah, and it's global, but again, in that process, I think people are recognizing the importance of getting this material digitized, especially where artist collectives and artists are making statements and what they've done and what they see.
Yeah, we all think that what we did was not, significant, but other people see it differently, and I guess we should pay more attention to other people.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.